If people really, if the powers that be, remember, you have three lobbies in the United States. Israel is its own thing. But in terms of domestic policy, there are three lobbies that are more powerful than anybody else: big agriculture, big pharma, and big oil. And if you get in the way of them in terms of the ability to take away their financial infrastructure, they'll come at you with everything they got. No one is telling anybody to stop building solar panels. No one is telling them to stop building wind farms. No one is telling them to stop building, if you can, hydroelectric plants. However, no one is allowing nuclear power to become a mainstay. And to JD Party Hat, who's one of our OGs, how do you deal with the waste? Look into Series 4 nuclear power. These are smaller plants that have replenishable waste. That's how it works. There is a reason these things don't take off here. But you know where they take off, ladies and gentlemen? I'll give you one guess where this is very, very big. It's very big in China, really big in China, really great over there. And that's a big problem because China does have the ability to supersede us. And they're going to in so many ways because they understand global hegemony in a way that the United States, as it's currently constructed, can't hold anymore. And unfortunately, the people who are in charge are willing to sacrifice tens of millions of people in order to maintain whatever level of hegemony they have. This is, again, another reason why we have to unite around these core class line issues, because if we don't, well, you're up shit's creek. And I also want to point out, if there is something that we can universally agree on, which we should, which I think is very important. If anybody is a reason to unite, it's little Ben Shapiro.
I believe the Trump administration did not handle the narrative well and let this perception that the tail was wagging the dog with respect to the comments you made earlier that Israel somehow had bullied the president into the war. Are you worried, as I am, that Israel is going to lose even more support in the U.S. as the perception is we've been dragged into this war by Israel?
Well, Scott Galloway, you shitbag of a human. Yes, I absolutely do believe that. And by the way, Scott Galloway, one of the biggest shit libs out there, in case you were wondering.
Israel?
From my position, if Israel is safer and the United States is safer and the poll numbers are worse for the foreseeable future, then that is a deal that is well worth making.
Is this guy out of his fucking mind?
You know, I waffle between thinking he's out of his mind and then thinking like he knows exactly what he's doing, because you can't argue it's been successful at pulling Trump away from the Israel first or the America first rhetoric that people loved about Trump, and captured him and put him into the wings of Lindsey Graham and Ben Shapiro and Laura Loomer and Ted Cruz, who make it their prerogative to support Israel first. He's a charlatan. He's a manipulator. I think he's exactly knowing what he's doing. And what you've learned is that these neocon sycophants have just been able to just kind of manage Trump's ego, as big as inflated as it is, and call him the strongest president. You're so powerful. You've really etched a legacy here, and get him to do these things. And I'm not saying that this is really 100% new. It is going to a new stage with a new war. But in the first term, we know he moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He shredded the JCPOA. He signed the Abraham Accords, and he killed Soleimani. So he did do the bidding of the Israel lobby in the first term. But you're seeing how these never Trumpers who went against him, they thought he was a madman. Why? Because he said, I want to get out of the Middle East. It was a big fat lie. Have captured him and reeled him back in. And that's where he stands today. So I think Ben Shapiro more knows what he's doing.
Better than me, Paul. You can say you're hanging there all day, you're higher than me, you're better than me. Yeah, well, I don't miss you. You're not. I'm a father. I can think that you are not better than me at all. Yeah, I'll teach you.
We have this rule on our channel that if you summon Ben Shapiro 3 times in the mirror, he has to appear as he did as a teenager, trying to pretend he was a tough guy with a punching bag, and he got punched in the face by the punching bag. So,
okay, I was like, what happened there? But that explains it, I guess.
Listen, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I am absolutely a strong, masculine man, and I can please my wife. I don't care what anybody says. Trust me. But this is a prime example of a person who has shown time and again that if you think that Israel will not drag us to hell with them, see Ben Shapiro. He always, well, if it means the safety of Israel and America, then that is a sacrifice that I am willing to make. Yes, obviously you're willing to make it.
Yeah, he's not willing to fight in their wars, though. It's only younger people who get roped in most cases, under an earnest desire to protect their own communities, their own country, that are siphoned off by Israel. The IDF will never take part in any of these ground invasions. The United States exists for them to attach as a parasite to do that, to our detriment, to the detriment of the American people, with our service members in body bags, with our bases destroyed in the Middle East. I would, end those bases, take every single serviceman away, but it is to our peril and to the perceived benefit of the Likudniks, not even, the only political coalition that exists in Israel, that we're to defer all of our sovereignty. It's so embarrassing, such a slap in the face. They call Israel the vassal state of the United States. It really seems like the United States is the vassal state a lot of the time.
Well, Jen likes to say that they are us and we are them. I would say that from the State Department, from the Beltway, yes, that is correct. And again, it is a cliche, but when you control the money, then you can control just about anything. And that, unfortunately, is the byproduct of the Zionist cause, which you could say has to do with wanting to control interests within the Middle East, West Asia. That's just one part of it. You have a ruling class in this country that is very much for the Zionist cause. And when you have the Jewish Zionists who provide the money and the Christian Zionists who provide the flock, again, they're the ones that are living in the heartland in the South. And you have, again, Texas is the biggest state in the country when it comes to Christian Zionism. You have Kenneth Copeland, you have Joel Osteen, you have Jonathan Hagee. You've got all of these really controversial individuals who, let's face it, this is all done for money and power, period. Kufi is just as powerful as AIPAC. But again, this gets back to, and why I think it's so important we have these conversations, because the one thing we've been pointing out about the Democratic Party, and one of the ways that they likely will seize power back in the midterms, has to do with we're against AIPAC. Okay, yeah, you're against AIPAC, but you're also funded by J Street. Do people not realize how many different pro-Israel lobby groups are on Capitol Hill? Maybe you should go there and see them, because AIPAC, again, they love it when you blame them. Heck, the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, he supports both major parties. It doesn't matter. And that is the danger in going back to sleep and having the liberal cause be put in charge, because they are so much better at selling it. They're so much better at convincing people that if we just couldn't get there, we'll get there next time. If you don't have Joe Manchin, you have Kirsten Sinema. If you don't have Kirsten Sinema, you have John Fetterman. If you don't have John Fetterman, you'll have somebody else, and they'll sell the same bullshit next time. Look at how close we got with our vote. And it's like, remember the Geico commercial? Oh, you almost got it. You got to be quicker than that. That's what it is. And there are people who still want to play on that hamster wheel. Well, guess what? As soon as you get off the hamster wheel, you look at the world a hell of a lot differently.
Yeah, sure do, man. Washington's so captured by these national lobbies, and I don't know what your audience thinks about this, but, it really has ramped up in the last century. And we had the 17th Amendment that supposedly supported the idea that we'll democratize the Senate by making those senators be elected directly by the people. But what really ended up happening is, instead of allowing the people to be the constituents, those senators went to Washington. They didn't return that often, and they became beholden to those national lobbies that grew out of the banking establishments, the military industrial complex, big oil and big energy. You mentioned that, big tech, big pharma. Everything is so entrenched in Washington that it's not representative. That's why I don't really think there's a panacea in terms of getting in the system and changing it from the inside. It's too systematic of an issue. I believe in pushing back from the states and localities using a principle called nullification that Thomas Jefferson and James Madison talked about in 1798, to, refuse to allow the enforcement of egregious, immoral, or unconstitutional acts within the territories of a state. And the states are tyrannical too. So if the states behave that way, do it at a county level. But it really takes education. It takes cojones on the part of elected officials that they don't often have.